The 911 is, with its rich history, undoubtedly a hero of our car world. And a lot of you guys and girls will totally get that. You'll understand the heritage, you'll desire and you'll want one of these, and that's great. But a lot of you won't understand why it hasn't changed much in its look over the years. You'll probably find it absolutely and utterly boring and not think it's worth the price versus other cars. But regardless of that, whatever other sports cars you and I might like have all in some way been influenced by the massive domination that the 911 has had over the sports car market. And for that reason alone, it is a legend in our car world. Living with a legend of the car world is a lot like meeting one of your heroes. You come in with certain assumptions, hopes, and fears, and it's only when you actually live with it, like I have with my car for almost a year now, do you then get to the truth at the end of it. So today, that's what this is all about. I want to explore with you what I've learnt as an owner of probably the Goldilocks 911, which is this 992 GTS, the best that the 992 generation has to offer. What is it like living with a 911 as a family? What is this car like, generally speaking, as a sports car? Can it survive a family of four? Is the 911 really worth the hype and your money? And if so, is the GTS really the one to get? Let's find out together, guys, right now. Now guys, one thing I want you to bear at the forefront of your mind throughout this video is that although we're talking about what it's like to live with a 992 GTS, a lot of what I'm saying can apply to any 911 generation. So if you wind up by the end of this video fancying an older one like a 997 or a 991, that's not so bad. And my sponsor today is going to help you should you decide to make an older car purchase. So my sponsor today is Car Vertical, who are a phenomenal service who allow you to check car history in thorough detail, be it mileage, more importantly, accidents, prior damage, all kinds of information that's absolutely crucial when it comes to buying any type of older car, because you just don't know if you're going to buy a lemon, what gremlins might crop up, what things the owners have hidden. The car could look nice, but what's the reality? Check out this RS4 that we have here. We pop this in, and as we go through it, you can see, oh no, it's had an accident. And if we scroll all the way to the bottom, we actually get photos of the accident. Oh, that's bad. Imagine buying that secondhand and not knowing that that's happened in the background. That would be awful. You can also check mileage here because they've got a mileage tracker, so you can see the graph and see, does that all make sense? Or sometimes you might even find clock cars. And as you can see, they're checking cars all over Europe, so this is hugely useful. I myself am also thinking about a 991.1, and using Car Vertical is going to be indispensable in that regard, because undoubtedly the cars are going to have higher mileage and a lot longer history for us to look through. If you're an RBR viewer, you get 10% off. Just use the code RBR when you're checking out a Car Vertical. I cannot recommend it enough. It will save you thousands upon thousands and help you get your dream car. Absolutely use it. Now, let's talk about living with the 992 GTS. Now, before we dive down that rabbit hole, a quick reminder, as I love to set the scene on any review, of what the 992 generation is all about. First of all, the body itself, exactly the same size, basically, as our 991 generation all-wheel drive cars. Now, all of the 911s come in the same body width. So previously, the all-wheel drive cars were wider. Now, the wide body sits across whether you've got rear-wheel drive like my car here or the all-wheel drive. But it hasn't grown in size versus previous generation, which is great because most cars end up growing. Next, the body itself, almost completely aluminium apart from our impact zones in the front and the rear, and we're down to almost only 30% steel generally. We've got active aerodynamics in the wing and the rear, which hasn't only got one level anymore. We've got those flush door handles that like to chop your fingers off. The engine is the right engine for the job. It's a turbocharged flat six, very similar to 991 generation, but modified. Now it sits further down the middle of the car in order to improve that weight balance, but also reduce vibrations. We've also got much larger turbos, which are now mirrored versions of each other, so not the same unit, spinning in opposite directions in order to give us more power. And now this engine is cooled right on top of the engine rather than from the wheel arches, so it's a lot more efficient in that way. We've also got pretty much the best electronic steering that the industry has to offer in the 911, and that's backed up with rear wheel steering, which of course only makes the whole game that much stronger. All cars get the 8-speed PDK or a manual if you want as well, which is fantastic. And the interior saw the biggest change that 911 ever had in terms of structure. It's fantastic in terms of its quality. It's a big change, and it's something that I'm going to talk a little bit about in terms of ownership later in the review. Now the Goldilocks car, the GTS 992. I've driven quite a few of these on RBR. We've done the Targa, we've done the lightweight package car that I'll mention soon. The last one we did was the Carrera 4 GTS, so the all-wheel drive version of this rear-wheel drive car. Today is all about the pure one, the rear-wheel drive GTS. Now, what do you get in GTS in 992? So the first thing you get as standard is PASM, where we have a suspension drop of 10 millimeters for both the coupe and the cabriolet, but it goes beyond that. You also get the helper springs from the GT3, which help you with road contact, additional extra springs. We've got a more rigid car in general, and we have stiffer spring rates, 40% in the front, 20% in the rear as well. So in terms of suspension, a lot done to make GTS as dynamic as possible. You get Sports Chrono package as standard as well. What that means is you get the active engine mounts, launch control, etc., which make the car as sporty as it can be for a base 911. Of course, you get Sports Design package as standard on the exterior with the center locking turbo wheels, which look great. The standard steels come directly from turbo, so we've got larger steel brakes, or you can of course option the carbon ceramic brakes as well. Now, if you want to know more about the lightweight pack car, which is 25 kg lighter, thanks to having the bucket seats in there, lightweight windows, lightweight battery, etc., check out my first drive of the GTS in Italy. You'll see that it actually sounds a lot louder because they actually removed a load of the sound insulation as well. And that is a very, very interesting car and very different to this. If you're looking for emotion, lightweight package is the way to go. But that's not what we have today. Today we have the purest one, which is to me the Carrera GTS rear-wheel drive. What I wanted to relate to you guys is what it's been like living with this car, because it's meant to be the Goldilocks 911. Does it really translate into that? Let's find out. Before I head on to that topic, one final thing about 911 in this generation: we are getting a facelift quite soon. Yes, it's been that long. How fast is the world turning? So we've seen it running around, all of them with the yellow hybrid stickers, which means a hybrid of some form of this generation. Now, what is that going to be? I don't think it's going to be a plug-in. From everything that I've read, it appears to be a mild hybrid setup. So you'll probably have a small battery, some type of mild hybrid assistance to give a bit more power. How is that going to affect weight, etc.? We will have to see. We've even seen what could be a GTS version with that hybrid setup as well. So maybe everything but GT product ends up being hybrid. In terms of design, they've got some interesting looking air intakes in the front, which may be active or may not. Not sure at this point. The whole thing kind of looks very similar to the 991.2 facelift, particularly on the rear, where you get the exhaust now more centrally in the middle. If you remember, the 991.2 had that as well. That's not far away. So let's see what that's going to be like. Anyway, I digress. Today is all about current generation of 911 and what is it like to live with. I think the first thing I want to talk about is, bring my prop back, practicality with a family. And you cannot do it if you have little kids unless you have space for a pram and you have space for a car seat. That's where we're going to start. All right, everyone, sports cars, big buying decision. And whether you're a guy or a girl, coming to that decision of going to something less practical isn't always simple. So you might end up with these thoughts in your head. How much am I really going to use it? Is it practical? Yes, I want to treat myself to a sports car, but you know, is it really going to do what I need it to do? Or you might have the conversation with your partner, you know, and they'll be like, well, what about your kids? Don't you love me? Don't you want to go with me? What about my shopping? And you're like, oh, for God's sake, fine. I'll just buy the RS6 or the M3 Touring, which, by the way, one of these might be the answer, as you'll find out soon in my Wagon Wars episode, which is coming to RBR soon. Anyway, these are things that we think about when we're thinking about getting a sports car like the 911. But the 911 is a bit unique in this because it's probably the most practical of the bunch. And we're going to start by talking about fitting a pram in it, a full-size one. Okay guys, here's my first prop that I'm going to use today. It is a Recaro pram. This is the model Easy Life Elite 2. It is generally full-size pram that my 3-year-old uses happily at the moment, and it folds up in a really nice way. And this apparently fits really well in the rear-wheel drive trunks of the 911s. So right, let's get the pram folded first, which is actually very easy to do with this one. Shortcut of opening 911 trunk is a little swipe. if you have the comfort access. Now, I've not tested this in an all-wheel drive car, but the Porsche forums online are brilliant. They're so chock full of knowledge. There's people there who are way more knowledgeable than I am. But a lot of the tips I'm going to give you today just on these bits are directly from those forums, so amazing. So that's the side profile, all folded. Simple matter of lifting. And that's it, it's dropped in. Now you're thinking, how much space do you still have? You can still squeeze a good amount of stuff around here. Believe it or not, I've got shopping, you know, little bags, you know, changing bags, that kind of stuff, all goes in there and it closes perfectly. So there you go. First big plus point in terms of family ownership, full-size pram absolutely does fit in the front. Now, I did a TikTok and a reel of this and I had millions of views about it, and you had the shitty comments going, yeah, well, you put the pram in, where are you going to put your kids? Well, you bellend, this thing actually has, albeit small, rear seats, so we can fit them in. Let me tell you about the car seat now. Right now, here is our car seat of choice. It's the Maxi Cozy Roadifix Air Protect. It's not so simple that you can just put any seat in the 911. The inherent problem that you have in this car is the lack of space in the rear bench, particularly the way that it's kind of, you know, that bucket shape at the bottom, which makes it restrictive. A lot of car seats will just step out too much this way, and then you'll be left with too little leg space for the little one. So you need to find one that sits nicely in that bucket. And this one, once again, thanks to all the Porsche owner forums, everyone was saying this is the one to go for. They were absolutely right. Now, how do you fit it in? This is an ISOFIX seat. So what you do first is you pop off this cushion cover, which reveals the ISOFIX points. Then I should even be able to do this one-handed. Clicked in, there you go. That's how simple it is. Now you can see just how well it sat inside that bucket shape, that when I close this, you still got plenty of space for the little one's legs. There is plenty of space in there. So that is a brilliant car seat, perfect shape. You also get the head protection that the rear bench doesn't give you, which is very important for children as well. Now, the real litmus test here is, how does he feel when he's sitting in there? Let's have a look and get the little guy in. All right, young man, let's go. What car is this?
Porsche car.
Good boy, Porsche car, go. Sit in your seat, go on. Look at that. So you've got my 13-year-old there. Happy birthday. And my 3-year-old here. And they look very, very happy. There you go. And as you can see, nice and comfortable. That seating position for me is a little bit tight. I'm kind of hugging the steering wheel. But they're happy back there. You happy back there?
Yep.
Or are you getting crushed? Be honest.
My knees a little crushed, but
yeah, so like 13 years old, kind of the limit for Porsche seats. We'll just leave them in there for the next few hours. But yes, so pram, car seat, absolutely. But then where do you put your other luggage? Fair point. Let's talk about that. Now, when it comes to 911, every little helps, as Tesco likes to say. So while we do lose some space because of the pram and stuff, you can see that we have this little luggage area behind our rear seats, which can actually fit a decent amount of stuff. So I've got this bag here, excuse the brand name, and you can either feed it through the top there, or if we pull our seats down, you get a better area to access that. The hatch doesn't open, it's not a hatchback, but you can still fit like a good few bags. But as you can see here, you can still fit a good few bags in the back there. That's a fairly large backpack. I can get probably 4 of those in there, which is not bad going, again, for a sports car. Every bit of space you can use, you need to be able to use. So the fact that you have that there in the coupes is not a bad result. Right guys, now to the most important part, which is actually driving this car. What is it like to drive? What is it like to live with? When am I using it? And the things I love and I discovered that I hate about the car as well. We'll talk about all of that and talk about living with a 911 in general, not specifically this one, but across the generations. First of all, with any performance sports car, what's really important to me is having a nice startup sound. And when you buy a GTS, I think you come in with certain expectations. So when I put it into sport, sport is always loudest in Porsche in terms of pops and bangs and, you know, that kind of thing. More than Sport Plus. Let's turn it on. Got some nice little rumbles. In today's day and age, it's probably enough considering how quiet most cars are, but it's nothing like to write home about in that sense. So if sound is a big thing for you, as you'll discover, this isn't going to tick that box perhaps as much as you might like. Now, let's get going. Now, one of the first things that I absolutely despise about the car, and it's not a Porsche thing, it's actually a VW, a VAR group thing, is the start-stop. It is terrible. Before you've even stopped, the engine ticks off and you're like rolling forward. It's rubbish. It's just, even A-classes and 1 Series and these type of cars get it right. In a 911, to have a start-stop system that doesn't realise when you've actually stopped is the most infuriating thing. In fact, it's so infuriating that I've used up one of my shortcut buttons. So you get two in the 911, one here on the steering wheel and one down here in your center console. This one here next to the exhaust button, let's turn on, is my start-stop deactivation because I hate it so much. Porsche, you need to get your own start-stop system that knows when a car is stopping and starting, because the detection of the foot on the pedal is pathetic in this. And I don't know how else to stress it. There's nothing that annoys me more in this car than that, which is why it's right at the top of my list. Now I'm just going to stop to demonstrate the other shortcut button that I use, which is on the steering wheel, and that is for 360-degree camera, and this is a brilliant option to have. The 911 has grown in size now. As we said, every single 911 now has the wide body of the all-wheel drive version, and to protect your wheels, etc., and to get through tight spots, that's absolutely essential. And it's nice to have in a sports car because it's not that common an option in this ilk of car. The other thing that you should get that I didn't is the lift system for the front end, because it's very low. It's in fact lower, I've found, than my GT Black Series in some occasions. And while it doesn't really scrape any part of the bodywork, it's the plastic protectors at the bottom that you get this horrible scraping sound from, and it just, it's awful, that sound. I hate it. I know you guys hate it as well. So if you can, I would try and get the lift system as well. Other things that I haven't gotten along with are the gear selector, which just makes everything slow. It's worse than what I originally thought when I drove a few press loads here and there. Living with it, it's been awful. It's just a horrible design. It's too small. I really miss the proper gear selector of the 991 and what you get in the GT product cars. It just slows everything down in the experience. Dare I say, I think the stalks on the steering that you get in Mercedes are even better than this, and I never thought I would say that. I really hope that they bin this in the facelift, but I don't think they're going to, which is a real shame. The other thing I just haven't gotten along with is the digital screens and the system here, in a number of ways actually. First of all, I don't think that the animations and the fonts and everything within here is reflective of the Porsche brand. I think it's too bland. I think the way it looks, you could find it in almost every single VW car and you wouldn't know which brand it was from. And the other problem I have, I think the touch points are just too small, particularly these menu buttons on the side, and then when you're in driving select, having to press these tiny little buttons in here while you're driving, I don't think is a great experience. I also find this recess within which the screen sits to be really uncomfortable, particularly when you're pushing things lower down or higher up. It just there's got to be a better way to do this, or a better way to control what you're doing with the car. And I don't think that the way that the system is designed at the moment is the way to do it. The facelift of the 911 is going full digital in the front like the Taycan. I really hope that Porsche double down on this, because compared to someone like BMW M and AMG, they're really taking a spanking when it comes to the digital side of things. Now, of course, the best thing about this or any other 911 is the technical prowess of the car in terms of sheer driving proficiency. And that is an area where the 911 just can't be matched. It is simply the last word when it comes to handling dynamics in the sports car world. It is so easy to drive, it's easy to feel like a hero, but it's also in rear-wheel drive a car that you do have to respect. And it's not just any one part of the overall handling experience, it's like every single element of it. First, the steering. It has got hands down the best electromechanical steering in the business, where, unless you jump straight out of a hydraulic steering setup into this, you're barely going to notice any difference. It is so good at giving you that feedback. And as a driver, that's half the confidence that you need. You need that steering feedback. You need to know what the wheels are doing at the exact moment that things are happening. Compare that with the option of rear wheel steering like I have in the GTS, which again I think is a must-have option. It makes things even better, because this is a car that's grown over the years, the 911. And when you're taking it down some more twisty country roads like this, you begin to feel the width of the car, but then the rear wheel steer just makes it all that much easier. Then in the GTS, the extra rigidity of the car paired with those helper springs out of GT3, really keeping your road contact good between road and tyre, just really inspires so much confidence, and the directional changes again that you can make at speed are just butterflies. And that area is where you find the joy of the 911, in that small window when you're driving really dynamically on twisty roads. That's where it just can't be matched. That's where all the fun is. In terms of speed, it is extremely fast. I've always said the base Carrera has enough horsepower. 480 brake horsepower in this and 570 Newton meters. That's a lot, okay? And it was made even clearer to me when I drove this at top gear, back to back with the GT3 RS, which has got about 100 Newton meters less of torque, and the GTS was, in a lot of areas, feeling just faster than that car. And I mean that genuinely, the GTS felt faster in a lot of areas versus the 3RS. Let that sink in. And now, just to dot the I's and cross the T's on speed, let's do a launch control. You have to go into Sport Plus, very easy to do. Foot down, see what it gets. Look at that, 3 seconds dead in a rear-wheel drive 911 GTS. That is insane. Do you know, we did 3.04 in the Carrera 4 GTS, the all-wheel drive one. That is a tiny difference, less than 4 milliseconds between the two of them. It's really a tribute to how brilliant this drivetrain is, that even being rear-wheel drive, you can almost get sub 3. Incredible. In terms of sound, Sport is the one to sit at, as I've told you in the past. You get more pops and bangs, etc. It's fairly acceptable, but it does hit a certain flat line. It doesn't have the crescendo of the 991 generation or anything like what you get in the current GT cars. So this isn't really a reason still that you pick up this car for me. The lightweight package was a totally different car in that regard. Less sound insulation. You heard so much more of that flat six engine. More of the interesting mechanical parts, and that emotional element is one part that I've been a little bit let down on GTS. I think, base Carrera does a good enough job in a lot of these things in that regard, and the GTS doesn't up the emotion quite enough. Because the engine is the same that you get throughout the rest of the 911 lineup, and it has a certain flat line without that emotional punch that perhaps we're looking for. And while no doubt the GTS is so much more accomplished dynamically versus the other Carreras, the base 911 does a lot of what this does. What makes me pause though in this whole thing is that all of those benefits and the best things that I found about the 911 aren't 992 specific really. Could you enjoy those things in pretty much any generation of 911, maybe with more emotion? I had a 991.1 Carrera S rear-wheel drive, and the sounds that car made with the natural engine were just glorious, but I was using it probably more because of that. So this is a worry I have. So I do wonder if for a lot of you guys, the classic 911 is the right way to go. And for me personally, I'm thinking, will GT product help to scratch that itch, even if it loses a bit of practicality? Will it be emotional enough? Now, I'm sounding negative while I don't mean to. I'm in a kind of a unique position where I've got quite a few cars. If you're looking for that one car solution that's not GT product, undoubtedly GTS is the right answer. It's got a bit more of that emotional factor while being the best dynamic car that a 911 can be. Now, the great thing about the 911 is that the times that I was using the car were quality times. It was, when you have to do those errands that you really don't want to do, but you want to do it in a way that makes you smile and that you actually look forward to it. This is the car that you pick. You're kind of like, fine, I'll go and mail that thing or pick up the groceries or whatever, and you'll do it in the 911 and it will make you smile A to B. And the other times that I was using it, which again, unique to this car as a sports car, was getting the family in for, special occasions, for that feel-good factor. When you want to feel good, you don't want to do it by yourself, you want to have, your favourite people with you. The 911 with its, yes, compromised rear bench, still gives you the option of doing that, and that's so important, I feel. The other part that you become very aware of, regardless of what 911 you have, is that you've entered a special community. You're getting nods from other 911 owners, respect from other petrol heads generally, random conversations at petrol stations. It becomes obvious to you very quickly that This is not your typical sports car. This is something with some real heritage that people respect. If you're looking for that one car solution that has the most emotions that a non-GT product car can, while still making you feel special about it and being the most dynamically capable, GTS is the one to have. And while yes, you can get quite close to this with a base Carrera, go anywhere near a track or put it up against a GT car and you'll realise how much more proficient the GTS really is. Owning a GTS as a serial car addict has shown me that owning a 911 and having one in the stable is an absolute must. It's hardly the most shouty sports car in terms of looks or emotion, so if you're looking for something to compensate for something that you don't have, I'm afraid this car will also fall short in length a little bit. But what you'll gain instead is a car that'll bloody the nose of anything else that dares call itself a performance sports car, whether it's in this segment or even the segment above. That's how proficient the 911 GTS is. And it'll do it in a style and a heritage that nobody else has, and you can bring your family along for the ride. What else could a performance car enthusiast want? See you guys next time.